This is Love and the Modern Man, where we talk about the 21st century man, his heart, and what he can do to expand it. Here with your host from the Unlimited Horizon, Shahin Gooneh, and match your date, Ariadna Pretz. We tackle different topics nearly every week with the same maxim, know thyself. It's by knowing who you are and what you need from yourself and others that you will be able to love to the fullest degree. Now here's the show. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Love and the Modern Man. I am here with a very close friend who I've known now over a decade. Mr. Bernie Burns from B2 Aviation. He's the president and founder of one of the premier private aviation firms based in Chicago, Illinois. And I got him on today to talk about change and transition more so. And we're sitting here in rainy Southern California, which seems like a change to the blue skies, 82 degrees every day, or 23 degrees every day, 25 degrees every day if you're in the other parts of the world that use Celsius. But I wanted to get into change, coping with change, how to follow signs, kind of like that idea. And we were out last night and we were talking about a story that came up where my friend here was, you know what, let's dive into the story. You asked somebody, what's next? And that kind of struck a chord with me.
Yeah, sure, I will. So first of all, thank you for having me on here. It's actually really nice to spend a little bit more time in Southern California. It wasn't always my favorite place growing up as a kid, and now I'm really discovering how much I love this area, and I totally get it. But back to the story about last night. So last night we were talking a little bit about, with a friend of ours, we were talking a little bit about challenging people, and I was very much like him in that, you know, I've chased after the girl who didn't necessarily want to be chased after, but when I found myself smitten with somebody, I kind of I just went too much, and I invested myself wholeheartedly in the pursuit of that girl. So I had one example where probably subconsciously I did something different and it got the reaction that I wanted without me expecting it. So I told our friend together, I used to be infatuated with this girl, Alex, and she's still a fantastic person. We're very good friends still. But the interesting thing about Alex was ever since I met her in high school, I pursued her hoping that one day something much larger would come from it. And I think I acted like that, even if it's subconscious. I'm the last person that you would expect to be focused on one particular girl in a given time. And she was very different from the day I met her in high school. So fast forward now, years later, post college, and us, you know, traveling and seeing each other and visiting. She is an extremely successful lawyer. She was on a Bravo show, so she's done really well for herself. And in the height of my interest in her, when she had this Bravo show, she had just passed the bar, I believe, in New York or Washington, D.C., wherever the case might be. Most people were messaging her, keeping in touch with her, because obviously now she's a really hot commodity. And my reaction and my first response to her when she tells me this was, great, what's next?
Yeah.
And I think that caught her so off guard because she was used to, you know, people praising her. She was used to a whole bunch of the normal things you would normally do when you've been rewarded with your hard work. But for me, I think the thing that caught her off guard was the fact that I challenged her in a way that she had never been challenged before by somebody that she knew that had interest in her. So so that was that came up last night, and it was a good reminder even for myself as I kind of go into relationships, just to make sure I'm always stepping outside of what I think is the normal thing to do and make sure I'm still challenging the other person.
That's interesting. I mean, I kind of on topic of the dating realm and a little on topic of the change, you know, like asking somebody, well, what's next? And I think one of the, I mean, personally, and without getting into too much story for everyone else, we're both at a point of change. You know, you're with business, with relationship, with whatever, with focuses. I feel there's a lot of change, and in bringing up this story, I feel like you've hit a few major points, and one would be the counterintuitive. You get a girl's number, you don't call right away, you don't text right away, but there's a limit to that, right? So it's if you go too counterintuitive and you just ignore her, well, it's not going to work either. Mm-hmm. But if you're chasing her and like hounding her, that's not going to work either. So it's almost finding the middle way, the Taoist way of kind of like, all right, so distance makes the heart grow fonder, but I don't want to forget who you are either. Who's this guy?
Right.
But it's also interesting. You mentioned, in a way, focus on higher value. She went through Bravo, she went through all this, but even prior to that, you kind of saw who she was, or who she is, rather, from a value point of view. And it's interesting when we see something that's valuable, we charge toward it, right? The nice shiny, I don't know, house, ring, girl, whatever it is. And it's funny because when we see it, we want it. Most people, you got to do hard work, you got to focus, you got to do. It's actually counterintuitive. If you relax, take a breath, kind of center yourself, slow down, you can actually make better choices, and clear, concise outcomes will occur. They may not occur as rapidly, but they actually do. And here's the funny. When we push and push and push, we're moving so fast that things happen fast anyway. But when we slow down, we feel like, oh my God, it's slowing down. But then when you actually take the choice or make the decision or whatever and go down that path, things unfold. Yeah. And it just seems like it's longer because it's like, oh, we had to wait for the damn cake to cook in the oven rather than just like, there it is, give me. So the cake is cooking at the same speed, right? It's just we're running around wondering who's coming, what's happening, and we get lost in that. So it's interesting when you talk about when we look at transition, whether from business perspective or relationship perspective, it seems to me, you said it yourself in a funny way, challenge in a new way. And I feel like on an interpersonal level, when I'm looking at like, okay, I might be moving here again, and as I'm looking at cars and motorcycles and furniture, and I'm like, I got 2 months before I even got to move. What if I found my perfect car tomorrow? Well, where the fuck am I going to put it?
Right, exactly.
And the challenge on that level for me is kind of like, okay, can I step back? Can I calm down? Can I breathe? Can I chill and say, hey, it'll work out. Even if that car isn't available tomorrow, which as we went around and saw, cars and motorcycles disappear.
Right.
The right one will show up. And I think that's, in an ideated way, we want a certain outcome. You want $1 million sounds nice, right? Is it better to win $1 million by the lotto or make $1 million by selling a business?
Yeah. In the same token where you're talking and you're looking at moving to Southern California and you're looking at, I should get a car. I should get a bike. Yeah. Where am I going to live? These are all positive things, right? Mm-hmm. These are all things that you're adding to your life. I think the same exact thing works in transition from a negative perspective. Mm. Last year was a really rough year. It was a great year. And then also it was a rough year in business. So I had a lot of negative things happen. Just recently, a few days ago, I stopped with a client that I was working with for the better part of a year. And so transition also works when you have those negative situations and you're doing the same thing. Take a breath. You still want a certain outcome, but you just have to take a breath, realize what's happening around you, and you still have to go on and do the things that you do on a daily basis, but you also have to be patient to wait to see how those things play out. And they
absolutely,
they play out positively, but it's funny that you say that in the same token of having positive change. And I say positive meaning you're adding things to your life, or you're making a change that you think is going to better you. Even when things seem like they're negative, you still have to follow the same mindset, and you still have to wait for the cake.
Absolutely. When people even fall off, it might seem like negative if you want to look at it as removal or addition. But in the grand scheme of things, it takes shit to make roses. Right. So, and even going back to the idea of like make $1 million versus win $1 million, it's still $1 million. Who gives a shit how you get it? Mm-hmm. You got it, right? And I think that's kind of what I find I've gotten caught up with in the past. There's a little bit of self-blame, a little self-doubt, whatnot. And so, for example, years ago I was engaged, and let's just call it the cheapest divorce ever, because even though I lost a 6-figure sum of money in that relationship in a business that went sideways, it took me quite a long time to get to a place where I realized, wait, it wasn't me. I made some silly choices. And what I still want is nothing has changed. And I think for a while there, whether I was dating the wrong people or just kind of like wasting my time or whatnot, it was because I was in a weird way afraid of creating the same issue and I don't know, picking the wrong one or going down the wrong directional path. And in turn, blaming myself if I'm not good enough to even make that choice. So why not do nothing? If it's not going to be successful, why bother?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of a means to an end rather than an end. Most people focus on an end. Oh, well, I want this, I want this, I want this. Instead of the means of enjoy the process of cooking the cake. Oh no, I want a cake now. Fuck, just why? You're going to eat it and that's going to disappear and you're going to be cakeless. And I feel the same goes with relationship. Oh, I need a relationship. I need to be with somebody. Oh, well, what about the courtship? You brought her up to me the other day, and I get this often of like, does your brain ever sleep? Do you ever rest?
Right.
Because I can be hyper analytical and I can overanalyze, and there's a potential human being in my life that I'm kind of focused on and I'm enjoying, and it's like, oh, I really want to get to know this person more. Well, it's funny. One of my personal mantras or beliefs that I prescribe to is that I want to get to know somebody every day. Even on hanging out with you, we've come across things that we're like, oh, well, we had these things in common. We didn't even know we had those in common, even though it's been a decade of knowing each other.
Right.
And it's fascinating to me because that to me enriches and rejuvenates. It's kind of like if you own a business or if you are in a relationship or whatnot, can you become sensitive to the subtleties of change? Like even when you pick up the phone and talk to somebody, hey, how are you? And like earlier when I was on the phone earlier with you, the woman I was talking to just seemed like she was stressed ahead. So I made an effort to say, hey, are you having a good day? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, well, I hope it gets better. It sounds like you're having, I'm just checking.
Right.
But I think with the ideation of transition is going back to something you also said was, what do you enjoy? What lends you happiness?
It's interesting you put that. And while you were just talking there, I actually had another thought, and it's kind of a question for you. But yeah, a lot of the when transition happens, I think it's a good time to go back to just what your core is, what your passions are, and what you want to put out there in the world. But my question to you is, and I think I have a few thoughts just generally because I think that that's something. Not that I only struggled with, but I think I'm actually very much improving on in the last year and a half or so, especially with talking with you on a regular basis. But what part of self-worth is tied to transition? And in other words, when you go through transition, how much or how does your self-worth play out in any kind of transition? In my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours, but in my opinion, I think that during any transition, whether it be, I'm going to go with this theme of positive or negative, you have to really remind yourself how you value yourself and what your self-worth is, because that will help you through the transition, either if it's good or bad. That kind of going to the basics of what your worth is important. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I would go out on a limb to say that self-worth is wrapped up a lot in habit. And what ends up happening is we all have our very unique habits. If they are self-serving, and if it's kind of like an investment, that's the way I look at it. If you put money in the bank and you get 1%, that's how much you value your money. If you put money in, say, real estate, make 10%, that's how much you value money. If you put the money in a higher risk, perhaps that has a higher reward, say 100%, 4,000%, whatever, well, that's how much you value the money. Now, granted, risk and reward tend to be balanced. So when it comes to self-worth, I feel most people are balanced, whether they complain about good or bad or not. So it seems to me that when we are in a transitional change and when we want things to get better, actively looking at, is this action loving of myself? And I think that's a big issue for a lot of people, in the sense that we, as human beings, are tribal. We tend to want other people around us. We want to make certain that they are happy and healthy and blah, blah, blah. But one of the fascinating things is, so we give into that, imagining that if we create this healthy network around us, that we and ourselves will be healthy. And the counterintuitive, as I mentioned before, is to do it backwards. In other words, if you take care of yourself, you go to sleep without your data on. So if there's an emergency, somebody can call you, but nobody can call. They're texting. So when you wake up, your phone is fresh, and there's not 100 messages to already start the day on an overwhelming. Like what ends up happening is when you do these small things, or even eating clean, like we talked about prior to this recording, it comes back to I am loving myself and allowing. I'm choosing this. I think that's the best way. I am choosing this. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing this. And that's actually a hard way to go forward, especially with negatives. Like, let's say you have a terrible relationship and the person's just cold and crude and ungrateful and whatever. At some point, you have to say to yourself, I'm choosing this. And that normally snaps most people the fuck up. You just wake up, hey, oh shit, I want this? Do I want this? Am I worth better than this? Worth more than this? And that's something worth looking at, and I feel like it's funny to me because most of my friends would come to me and say, oh, can you talk to me? Whatever. Yeah, sure. We'll talk. And 5-6 hours will go around and I feel energized. Well, do I sit and ponder and contemplate for 5-6 hours by myself? No, maybe a half hour, maybe an hour. And then I get on with something else. Unless I'm motorcycle riding cross country and then it's like 5 days of contemplation. But it's interesting, we as a whole, and I say we, and there's a whole other me and we discussion I'd like to get into, but we tend to give to other people what we feel we need. Like we point the finger and say, you need this, whereas we fail to see those 3 fingers pointing back.
Yeah, to your point, that's a perfect transition. Let's go specific for the people that are listening to in your audience. You said, and remind me if I messed it up, but you said that we tend to treat people based off of what we need, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that is kind of what I think I was getting to with my point of self-worth. If we don't think we need that much, or if we don't value ourselves that we need X, Y, and Z, that's kind of how we're going to treat people. If you're pointing at somebody and saying, well, let's say, put it like this: if you're pointing at somebody and you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you,
sure,
meaning that you see yourself in that person you're pointing at, right? Yeah. So from a transition perspective, let's just go with the very specific situation of being a business owner and being in business. If I don't have the self-worth, or if I don't value myself enough in speaking to clients about how much the company needs to get paid for a particular project, or how much commission needs to be added on top of the flight that I'm doing, if I don't value myself there enough, then any transition is going to kind of come off the rails, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, if you are not going to stay, somebody asked me, why don't you have a coaching business? Like, why don't you have more profitable? I said, because I don't like charging friends.
Right.
And that's my own issue. Is I do this for free because I enjoy it. And when I do charge people, it's funny because like when I do charge people, it's people who don't know me personally, and it's because they're looking for something from me. If it's a friend, they want to talk. Okay, fine. Well, we can sit down and talk for a bit. The counter to this is, or the add-on, I guess would be the better linguistic way of saying it, is there's 2 types of people in the world. There's me-us's and we-us's. And I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but me-us's are selfish people. And they tend to be about 20% of the world. If you're in a relationship with a me-us, they take care of themselves, and they will take care of you like they take care of themselves. It's fucking fabulous. That's who I was engaged to. Was somebody who was just give me, like all the amount of information, whatever. She gave to me as much as she gave to herself. But then the us category in the me-us is just kind of like, well, they're just outliers. The 80% of the world, which is kind of funny, are we-us's. They kind of put themselves last. And they take care of everyone else first.
It's definitely a we-us.
So then if you're in a relationship with a we, if you're not taking care of yourself as a we-us, then your us is kind of getting left behind too, right? So, and then if you got 2 people who are we-us, it's like
nothing ever happens. Yeah.
So it's kind of an argument for a selfish boundary, like a healthy selfishness. Anne Rand wrote a great book, The Virtue of Selfishness. It's a little dense read, but quality. But I think to go back to self-worth,
the more you value yourself, just as a baseline, the more you value yourself, the more your actions will show it. You'll be able to say no when things come up that don't serve you. You'll say no to obligations that are not two-way streets. You'll say no. And in that, you end up not only maintaining your integrity and your energy, but you compound it, because then it's got to go somewhere, right? So it's like it's filling your fuel tank up.
Right.
Well, if you're running around town trying to be everything to everyone, what do you got? You're just an empty fuel tank.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right. So I think with business or whatnot, it really takes time. And one of the comments we've made on the show many times over is know thyself. Know what you're worth. And most people are, well, how much is that? No, it's not a how much. Maybe it's analytical. Maybe it's I need to make this much money. Maybe it's I need to have this car. That's fine. For me, it's what feeling do you want? I mean, we've been here now. Well, I've been here now 2 weeks. Been here almost a week with me, and it's interesting. I do miss being able to communicate rapidly with people. People get it. We've talked about 80-20 prior, and I don't want to really go into that here, but
that's definitely a conversation for another time.
But I guess let me ask you this: as we're both in transition, if you were going to give people an idea to walk with about, hey, how can you modify, enhance, better your self-worth? After all these talks and all these connections we've had, what would you throw at somebody who, I don't know, might be suffering, who might be kind of like a dog chasing its own tail, kind of get them to wake up a little, maybe?
And I'm going to go from a very basic perspective, just kind of how how I'm reminded to do this on a daily basis. Mirrors are really fantastic tools.
Okay.
And even if it's as basic or as funny or as simple as looking yourself in the mirror and envisioning what you want to see in yourself.
Yeah.
Putting yourself out there in the world to make sure you're receiving all the things that you've said about yourself. So, for example, specifically, let's talk business, because that's sure. That's where I'm at right now in my transition. If I want a certain outcome, or if I want to see myself eventually in a certain light, I look at the mirror. You can have a conversation with yourself. You can role play as if you are the client that you're going to be speaking with later today, but you're always looking at yourself. And if you can speak to yourself in a way that gets you where you want to be, then you know how you should be treated, and then obviously in turn what your self-worth is. So it's a constant exercise in just looking at yourself to make sure that you're getting the right things. We've spoken a little bit before about the tool of the mirror as a tool as well, and writing positive things on there, and then yet you still see yourself. So it's all in line with that. I think the mirror is a real positive tool, and obviously the physical mirror is, but if you have the ability to just kind of take a look at yourself driving in the car, or right before you go into that meeting, or right after a fight with a loved one or whatnot, and if you're able to look yourself in the mirror, regardless if it's physical mirror or it's whatnot, I think that's the most effective thing that's worked for me in terms of what I would tell somebody to do, just to kind of consider their self-worth.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned mirror work and kind of looking at yourself. One of my C.G. Jung, one of my favorite psychologists, he was big into dreams. And something I've known about dreams is that you're everyone in a dream. So let's say you get pulled over in a dream, you get arrested in a dream, whatever. You are the criminal, you are the police officer, you are the judge, jury, and everything. So if you're beating yourself up, you might have that dream. It's interesting because I had a dream not too long ago of an ex, and I hugged her and wanted to say goodbye, and I love you, I care about you, whatnot. And she was too busy to even acknowledge that, and off she went. I was like, "That's a fascinating dream." And I feel like to offer this at a personal level, that's part of me that I was letting go, and it was so busy that it didn't even notice I was letting go. So it's gone. It's gone. And to go even further in the mirror work, pointing the finger, 3-point back, we mentioned that. And I guess to add to all the things we've kind of hit rapidly here, I really appreciate the compression of this
It's been good.
podcast. You mentioned outcome, and I like the word, and I'm going to flip it.
Cool.
So instead of outcome, in go. So whatever outcome you want, see where it connects with the in go. So in other words, I want a business where my time and energy are valued, seen, appreciated, and the outcome is X amount of dollars. Okay, well, what's the in go? What goes into that? Not only into that, but what has to go into you? What beliefs, what operational? Do you put up with people canceling meetings? Do you put up with people not calling back? Or do you find better clients by being better yourself? Do you forget to call people? Do you you're pointing the finger and you're saying, well, what an asshole. You're like, oh shit, 3 pointing back.
Exactly. And what am I emulating the exact same things that I'm calling out in that other person? Am I doing the same thing? Am I scatterbrained? So I didn't, if I say to somebody, oh, they don't have their schedule together, they're not valuing this call, whatever it is. Well, am I valuing myself in that moment? Right. Am I also scatterbrained? Is my schedule all crazy because I'm not exactly sure where I'm going? So you're exactly right.
Yeah, and that's where you have control. You have control over you and nobody else. You can influence other people, but at the end of the day, it's all on you. And if you move toward knowing yourself, you may know how to find ways to manage yourself better. And there's tons of tools, tons of tools. And if anyone's interested, you can always reach out to me, The Unlimited Horizon, on Instagram and DM, connect, and we'll talk. As far as with Bernie, I think if you need a private jet charter in the Chicago area.
Yeah, you can always hit me up. It's Bernie at b2aviation.com. Or if you want to go to one of my handles, Instagram, and is CB3 and the letter O.
And even if you need experience-based aviation excursions.
Yep, strategy.
Strategy. This is the man to connect with. Well, let's cut out. I do appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was really enjoyable.
Some good transitional self-worth ideation here.
All right.
Thanks, man. Love you. Thanks, guys, for joining us. And till next time. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Love in the Modern Man with us, Shahin Gooneh, and me, Ariadna Peretz. If you like our show, please subscribe and leave us a review and rating on iTunes. Until then, lots of love.